Why shouldn't the system be, what do you call it? Shouldn't there be a time for constitutional changes? We know that over a period of time, maybe after 20, 25 years, the constitution is what do you call it? The need to have constitutional changes as the society evolves.
Now, JB, something interesting that I chanced on this morning, a website, allafrica.com, is reporting that, or they are alluding, part of the reasons why Trump fired his Secretary of State, Tillerson, is because he visited Nigeria. Is there any truth in that? Is there any inference to that?
No. They've always been, you see, you know, there was a school of thought and some group of eminent analysts I was listening to yesterday. A group of them gave a school of thought. You see, Donald Trump is a nonconformist. He's somebody who shoots from the hip and does not go according to the established U.S. foreign policy dictates.
Right.
Now, things like meeting of North Korea, you have to take time before you meet them. You have to go through maybe different stages of meetings. For instance, you go, first and foremost, you go through what we call interest sections, whereby low-level officials meet. And after that, you go to the second level of meeting where it might be ambassadorial. Then thirdly, go to a level where maybe foreign ministers meet. And then lastly, you go whereby the presidents meet. So it goes through stages. So as you go along, the relationship pause as it goes along. Because we say it's like it's frozen. So it's like an ice block, it's frozen.
Right.
And the first set of people who meet are like the interest people, like you have just officials, trade officials, they meet and they discuss. When they discuss, then when you find the relationship is pouring, then you make maybe your Deputy Secretary of State or Deputy Foreign Minister meet. Then you see that there is a loosening of the screws. Then you make your Foreign Minister meet. Then you realize that you are getting there. So eventually, before the presidents meet, there's been a lot of groundwork. Yes. Now this thing which Donald Trump wants to do, he wants to go straight ahead and meet Kim Jong-un. Which people are advising that be very careful because North Koreans are very dangerous and they've had a history of playing it dirty. If we might not remember in the 1980s when the president of President Chon Do-hwan was president of South Korea, he was nearly killed in Burma through a bomb blast. His foreign minister, prime minister, and some very 6 or 7 ministers got blown up in a bomb blast. He was saved by seconds because his motorcade was distracted by by 30 seconds. Now, this was an era where the North Koreans were trying to play it soft with the South Koreans, and they were nearly killed. The president was nearly killed. So people are saying that Donald Trump is very careful because you cannot trust the North Koreans. Look, they are about the last standing communist country apart from maybe China, which is a superpower. But then you look at North Korea, which is desperate for development. And this is a country which wants attention. Do you believe them when they are talking about meeting the U.S.? Well, over years they've been in hostile confrontation with the U.S., who they've even said they want to nuke and bomb. You have to look at it from different angles, whereby you have to be certain of them. Because North Koreans are people who are bent on pushing across an ideology which is non-existent. Well, they've got ideologies like the Songun, where they believe that the military is the foremost runner to the revolutionary process. The Americans do not believe in that way. The Americans believe in democracy. How then do you sit at the table of negotiation with such people who have had a dynasty which has lasted for over 60 years? Oh, sorry, almost 70 years. Right. Even since 1948 till today, one family has ruled from father to son to grandson. How do you also go to a society whereby half of the people are living in hunger?
So do you see, JB? Do you see this meeting in any way being stalled, or you think?
No. We've Rex Tillerson out of the way. Pompeo is going to be a yes man, and Pompeo would always follow the tickets of Donald Trump. You know what? I was listening to Donald Trump yesterday around 12:30, 1 o'clock, when the news came out that he had sacked Rex Tillerson. He said one thing, now I've got a cabinet I want.
He's got a cabinet he wants, a cabinet that wouldn't oppose anything that he wants to do.
A cabinet who would be yes men, a cabinet who would not think for themselves. Mind you, it was reported, and I have not got any other confirmation, that Rex Tillerson along the way had called Donald Trump a moron. And, people were seeing how, someone like Donald Trump is an establishment man. If you know his background, he was chairman or chief executive or one of these oil companies, a very wealthy man, very, very astute, and is a personal friend of Vladimir Putin. And people were saying that he was brought in to try to have an influence over Vladimir Putin. Yes, he was doing a very good job as a Secretary of State, but then he realized that he wanted to go through the process of being an established diplomat, not a yes man. Because you might do, the only person in the American U.S. cabinet who's supposed to be about politics is the Secretary of State. That person, even though he's appointed by the president, is supposed to seem to be doing diplomacy, not politics. Now, Donald Trump wants somebody who will be doing politics rather than doing diplomacy. And that's going to be very dangerous for America.
Go ahead, JB.
Because America has always had a long-standing diplomatic code, withstanding of who is in power. So depending on whether the Democrats or Republicans are in power, America has a standard diplomatic code which should be followed. So if you get a president who wants to flip that into a political agenda, then America is in trouble. Because mind you, the Chinese aren't playing, Daniel. The Chinese are not playing. And if America wants to continue to lose influence in Africa, which they have, and they continue to lose influence, because the Chinese are opening up their arms wide open to such Africans, then you should realize what's going to happen to them.
So JB, do you think then that this alignment with Donald Trump and the North Korean leader has any implication for Africa in any way at all? Will it make America lose further grips on or further ties with how Africa and America trade now, and rather begin shifting towards other nations?
You see, America, mind you, let me tell you something. Since the Chinese leadership of Xi Jinping, okay, China has been very aggressive in the African continent. If you do realize how much money they are putting into Africa and a lot of infrastructure, and the extractive mining industry, in terms of and the trade of Africa has risen very high. Why? The reason is that China is now seeing Africa as a partner. Rightly or wrongly, the Chinese also have their problems, which we'll also address on another day. But America has always, even though they've been of help to Africa, there's always been some attachment, some political or underlying attachments to their help. They've always tried to dictate the political direction the governments would always want to go through. You understand me?
Right.
And that has always been a problem with Africa. For instance, look at Kwame Nkrumah. I've never been a supporter of Kwame Nkrumah, but Kwame did a lot for Ghana in terms of infrastructure. And then you look at it, months later it's overthrown because the Americans thought he wasn't doing their bidding. Look at people like Patrice Lumumba. And in the flip coin of Patrice Lumumba, who's a progressive man, wants to do well for his country, what did they do? America sponsored a coup, and they bring in Mobutu Sese Seko Wazabanga, becomes president, and look what he just done to Congo. He destroyed the whole setup. Why? Because Americans will always want to influence the direction which they want the policies of the country to go into. Meanwhile, China doesn't do that. China will give you the money. They will want their cut in the whole deal.
Okay.
Want the extractive thing. And mind you, the most important thing in which Africans should learn is that China do not ask the deep questions. What are the deep questions about human rights? Because China themselves have question marks about it. the problem with the relationship between America and North Korea, I don't think it has much bearing on the relationship with Africa, because North Korea itself is not a powerhouse when it comes to trade in Africa.
Yeah.
They are not a powerhouse, and they're a country which is basically living off the handouts from the West or from the UN or from the World Bank and others themselves. The problem is that America has realized one thing, and that's why Mr. Rex Tillerson went to Africa. You realize one thing, that Africa is now shifting towards China. And with the statement by the President of America calling Africans S-holes, the relationship between Africa and America has changed tremendously.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's changed because China have also now taken a new stance towards Africa. What happened when Donald Trump called African states such names? The Chinese have now rather increased their help to Africa tremendously. When he called us S-holes, China has now increased its partnership with Africa in terms of trade and investment. So, and China is not the old China, whereby you could find that they were archaic in their stand. China is a country which, as you know, is running one state but two systems. They have their communist political system and they have their capitalist economic system. And when that works together in tandem and Africans are comfortable with it, they'll take it on board. Yes, they might have problems with their human rights, but China is now taking the lead where America has failed to take. So I think that America needs to up its game. But with the meeting in North Korea, it's a way of I don't see the benefit of it. And I think America is just trying to find new friends somewhere, which
possibly a friend they've lost in Africa.
They've lost friends in Africa. They have. I mean, they've lost friends in Africa because, Daniel, the problem is that they have a president who doesn't understand the dynamics of diplomacy. That's why Rex Tillerson went there to try to calm nerves, but he's eventually got the sack.
That is very unfortunate. Now, JB, let's tie this into this conversation that I've been talking about this morning. There's a publication in the Voice newspaper that talks about Prince Andrew, Duke of York, hailing the role young African engineers can play in providing solutions to some of Africa's and the world's most pressing problems. Now, all through the submission in the latter part, you've been talking about Africa's relationship with China, how the Americans, there is a relationship with them and they influence how countries should be run in Africa. Now, I am sitting here thinking that do we always need that sort of affirmation? Do we always need that sort of endorsement before Africans can do things for themselves and for their own countries?
Yes, that is why you see the president of Ghana is talking about Ghana or Africa beyond aid. Aid, as you are talking about, our engineers coming in to do the work. That is part of aid, technical assistance. We've got the men, but are the men and the women out there who are engineers and architects and civil, mechanical, chemical engineers, are they willing to come down to the continent to work? Are they motivated?
That's a huge question.
You see, because there is look. You know, one of Africa's biggest problems, Daniel, is not about we don't have the people. It's about motivation. It's about the motivation, and it's about brain drain.
Have we lost a sense of nationalism as a result of the hostile environment we face from our own people when we go back home?
You know, this question, in fact, is a very good question. You know why we lost? You know why I would say we've lost it. You know why? We've lost the sense of nationalism because of our bad leadership. Our bad leadership over the years, where people have tried to sacrifice to build a nation, and all what has been done has been torn down by corrupt and nepotic and kleptocratic leadership on the continent. If you have a leader who is visionless, how can people be patriotic? Patriotism comes when they find out that the man at the top believes in has a vision and believes in what he does. Look, people like Mr. Magufuli in Tanzania.
Right.
That's a leader you can ascribe to if you want to be patriotic. Leaders like what do you call it? Even President Kufado, who's just been president for 1 year. Look at the way he's trying to rally the country around. You've got people like even President Buhari. Even though how hard it is, he's got a sense of direction.
But even in the midst of all that, some people within the country and within the setting would have some other school of thought. Would think
Yes.
that, listen, like you are trying to re-engineer everything and re-bend the whole wheel. Why don't you just let us move on the free wheel we have already?
You know, let me tell you something about our continent. It's like free for all. Everybody wants to dip his or her hand into the coffers and run away with it. Look at the stories that are coming out, deals coming out here and there by the past government, and even now they even believe that there's something happening down in the new government too in Ghana. Let me tell you something, that if we do not sit down and have a sense of nationalism or purpose, we would one day go down the drain. Look, the Western societies, those days they were coming into the trade with Africa. The governments, the colonial governments, were sending down private businessmen to do trade on behalf of the government. And they were doing it on the name of the government, even though they were private businessmen. If you look at those expeditions that came to Africa for these traders and all that sort of thing who were coming down. They were coming down, yes, they were doing business and they were doing business in the name of the crown. We as individuals, when we are doing business as Ghanaians, do we have in mind the national cause? We do not. It's about how we would benefit. And even when we even do business, we even try to avoid and don't even pay our taxes.
That's a serious one. But are there the systems there to effectively collect these taxes? Because with the issue of tax that you've just mentioned, we live here and we know how the systems work here.
Yes.
Right. And I know that in other European and American countries that the systems work.
Tremendously, sir.
Yes. So in Africa, how are we going to get that system to work?
That is when you see, when we talked about the last government tried to expand on taxation or taxation base, which this government is continuing. The thing is that we do not keep records. You know, we always had a problem with keeping of records, sufficient records. Now that they are trying to computerize the base and even have the GPS address system, and to also have a database where everybody would go onto the national ID card, it's through that you'll be able to trace and get people to pay their taxes. So it's a long-term system been neglected over years. And if you're able to have a centralized base, not paper-based, centralized, computerized base, which would then be on your ID card, which would that ID card have all your information, the address. Look, start naming of the roads, which when I went to Ghana last year, all the roads have been named. You've got addresses. And even when you have your Google Maps, it works in Ghana.
It does.
And that Google Maps
I can attest to that.
Yes, and the Google Maps which I used when I was driving, it took me to my destination, Daniel.
It does.
It does. And when it does, these are part of it. So when you have things that are not working, we're able to identify that Mr. Humphrey Thompson Davis lives in number 1 Abavana Avenue in Airport.
And that's a name you just made up, right? So
yes,
it's nobody's name.
No,
actually, let's put a disclaimer out there.
That's I made up. So you just that name I make it. So you are able to identify that man's address, and you're able to identify that so and so lives here, and therefore you're able to identify that this is a potential taxpayer. You know, when we were young, There was nothing like that. It's like a man, or what's this person's address? Or he lives near the cocoa seller's house.
Absolutely. And when you get to the cocoa seller, she will also tell you you are lost, and then take a right.
And take a right, and then you find what do you call it?
A mango tree.
A mango tree where there's a man who sells bottles there, and asks the Alaji whether Mr. So-and-so lives here. You understand me? And these were things which you have to live with years. Now it's being streamlined. And this will help us to be able to expand our revenue base by getting the taxation right. And then when you get the taxation right, you'll be able to, develop from there. And it will also make sure that if these funds are used properly, Daniel, these engineers and these technicians realize that, yes, the government in power has a vision, and therefore it will draw us to make us more patriotic and be part of the ongoing system for national development. So it's a dynamic.
It's a dynamic, and JB, I feel strongly that it's an inner tenacity that we should develop. It's an inner feeling, an inner conviction that we should have, that the problems of Africa need to be solved by Africans. The problems of the community.
I agree with you. You see, and it's also the will, the tenacity, the will, and it's also one thing which I also say that we need to be re-educated. Re-educated, not basically by going to school, but groups like the NCCE, National Council for
Civic Education,
should sit down and draw the plan, saying to themselves that we need to re-educate the people on the need to be nationalistic, to be patriotic, to love the country, and to push the country forward. Look, countries in Africa are lacking when it comes to a sense of identity of their country. Apart from when it comes to football or boxing, they don't associate with their country with anything else. When it comes to sports, that's it. But it doesn't go beyond sport. They will never want to sacrifice for the will of the country. Why? Because the people in power do not sacrifice. I
think fashion is also gaining some grounds. Fashion and music is also gaining some grounds.
Yes, because fashion and music does it for the. But apart from fashion and music, how can that help in that? Okay, that's a part of it. But you see, beyond that, you want to say that as ministers, the ministers will stop driving in Bentleys, Benz cars, V8, and then we will use that money to buy the machines for hospitals. You find that the whole hospitals do not have.
Well, I hope we're able to emulate what Magufuli has been doing in Tanzania.
Yes, we need to. The continent across the board. I mean, it's across Zimbabwe to Zambia to Ghana to Nigeria. The story is the same.
But once someone has been able to do it, JB, someone like Magufuli has been able to do it in Tanzania, it means that this thing is doable, isn't it?
Yes. And Magufuli is doing it. Nana Akufo-Addo wants to do it. Because look at what Mrs. Akufo-Addo has done. If you read about it, within her being first lady 6 months, she built a whole new She had campaigned Citizens for Funds, and he had a whole new unit in the hospital somewhere in Kumasi. Kumasi, one of the places.
Right.
And they want to do it across the border. He wants to focus on children's hospitals, which for me is a right thing. It has just been done within 1 year, they'll be able to do it, and so that it can be done. And if you have a first lady who is selfless and is going in that direction, Ghana has hope. And if you see things like that happening, and other first ladies or other first ladies around the continent wanted to go in that direction, there should be hope for the continent. Because mind you, the amount of money which is used on cars in Africa, it's mind-boggling. Meanwhile, you go into hospitals and basically 2 babies are sharing 1 incubator. How much is an incubator?
I think it behoves of all of us. It behoves on all of us as well as diasporans to be able to rise up to take up some of these challenges. But JB, I'm going to come back to you shortly. Let me quickly take a breather. And there is still the story from Sierra Leone which we need to look at before we go off today's program. So stay with me. I'll be right back. This is The Discourse with me, Daniel Datson, and is ABN Radio London's Afropolitan radio station. If you have just joined, we have been having a discussion on on Africa, and whether we need a sense of nudge before we can do the things that would solve Africa's problem. And even in African communities, do we need to be affirmed before we rise up and solve the issues that are challenging our communities? My guest on the line with me, Mr. JB Danquah, political analyst, social commentator, and he's a friend. Actually, he's a very good friend of the program. I'll be right back.
ABN TV, your favorite black channel, has launched ABN Radio, London's Afropolitan radio station. In 4 easy steps, you can listen to ABN Radio on DAB in your car and home. Step 1. Select DAB from the menu on your car stereo, or choose DAB from your car's media center. Step 2. Press Auto-Tune, Auto-Scan, or the retune button for a full scan. Step 3. Select ABN Radio, London's Afropolitan radio station. Step 4. Relax and enjoy the very best in Afrobeats, gospel, R&B, hip-hop, talk shows, and more. Listen and engage with our amazing presenters. That's just 4 easy steps. If you've got only FM and AM receiver in your car, you can obtain a DAB converter from High Street Electronic Stores. Call 0208 671 9777 for more information. ABN Radio, London's Afropolitan radio station. What do you like for breakfast?
Well, it depends what mood I'm in. If I'm happy, I like a little bit of porridge with banana because I'm feeling healthy. If I'm in a...
Me, I like a bit of fruit. Nice apples, sliced apples.
I love
banana.
a cinnamon and raisin bagel, some scrambled eggs, and a...
I say nice English breakfast.
Salad, fruit, and orange
I
juice.
like wholemeal bagel with a bit of cream cheese on it and some bacon and then some avocado. And on the side, I like to have
Fried egg with bacon, with baked beans, toast.
I normally take my cocoa. Yeah, I'm a Ghanaian. I'm a typical Ghanaian, so I like my cocoa.
I'm not too sure. I normally don't eat breakfast.
It doesn't matter how you like your breakfast, or you may not like breakfast at all, but you will love the sound of your radio when the breakfast is Afropolitan. Watch out for the new ABN Radio Breakfast Show with... Now that's a suspense. ABN Radio, London's Afropolitan radio station.
Consider that life wasted. Consider the heart of the family ripped apart. Consider the potential never realized. Are these the things you consider when you carry a knife? It's not about street cred or respect. It's about staying alive. Drop that knife and save a life. Gwenton Slowly, supporting all family and young people.
Thanks, Gwenton, for that amazing, inspiring message there. I'm still here with JB. JB, welcome back onto the show. Thanks very much.
Your advert has made me hungry, so I'm up to go and get some Hausa cocoa because you made me hungry. I mean, I'm surely going to go to the shop because it's a sense of pride to have that porridge. I'm going to speak to my local African shop.
Your taste buds have been prepped up this morning, haven't they?
They have. A very quintessential advert.
Thank you, JB. We have just about 5 minutes. JB, let's quickly look at Sierra Leone. Now, last week we mentioned briefly that the election which was being held, and a week after, 16 candidates failed to clinch the 55% of the votes necessary to win the first round. So the National Electoral Commission Chair Mohamed Naifali Conte has made an announcement at the press conference yesterday night that there will be a second election runoff exclusively between the All People's Congress presidential candidate Dr. Samura Matthew Wilson Kamara and the Sierra Leone People's Party presidential candidate Julius Maada Bio. What do you make of this?
You see, I don't like Maada Bio.
Is there any reason why?
He was a former president, and they were part of the problem which Liberia and Sierra Leone went into the civil war. You see, these are people who, for me, left to me alone, I'm not joking, left to me alone, he should have been allowed to stand. Because you mind you, those are the guys who put the country into chaos. After him overthrown Captain Valentine Strasser, they staged the coup in 1992 to overthrow General Saidu Momo. You know, when President Chaka Stevens left power in 1985, he handed over power to the Chief of Defense Staff. That was General Saidu Momo. And Saidu Momo ruled for 7 years and was ruled by these young captains, who was led by, Captain Valentine Strasser. But Valentine Strasser was then overthrown by one of his own deputies. That was Mother Bill. And when Mother Bill was there, and then there was an election, after that the country started going downhill because they allowed the rebel to overrun the country. Now he's coming and he wants to be a democratically elected president. That's another thing for another day. Now, I'm happy that the Sierra Leonean system has evolved. I was only yesterday, due to our work as journalists, I was going back into time in history, looking at the historical antecedents towards the present time of Sierra Leone. And Daniel, I would advise all people of his history and all students of journalism to look at the mug shots. Shots taken by, there was one famous journalist called, he's a Sierra Leonean called Samara Soros.
Right.
And he took a photographic picture and did films on it. And you could see the extent of the civil war of Sierra Leone and compare it today. And I'll say Sierra Leone has moved forward tremendously. It has moved on forward. You could see from a devastating war in which people had their hands chopped off because the rebels said, they came and they said, the slogan for the election after the rebels are taken over, the slogan for the election was, the power is in your hands. So you know what they did? The rebels said, you said the power is in your hands. So what they did was they chopped off the people's hands so they cannot vote. So when they got there, they asked you, do you want long sleeve
or short sleeve?
Short sleeves.
That was hugely barbaric.
Yes, barbaric. And this country has moved, after 20 years, the country has moved from that to now a fully fledged democratic system. It shows you one thing about the tenacity of Africans, that when Africans want their system to work, it can work.
Absolutely. It speaks of itself, isn't it?
Yes. It's symbolic, saying that a country which has gone through war, after the war, what happened? They were ravaged by Ebola.
Right.
And it's a country which has not been allowed, it's been suffered for the past 20, 25 years. So now I hope that this is the turning point. If this election goes through well, which I know it will, because the last one they did go through very well. If it does go through very well and the system evolves, then the Sierra Leoneans will be part of the club of the democratic family. West Africa is now becoming a hub of democracy. And for me, the Sierra Leonean people should then come together and harness their resources because they've suffered immensely. They suffered immensely because it's a country which has so much diamonds. And because of what happened in Sierra Leone during the 90s, we had something which we call the Kimberley process, whereby diamonds which were taken from that region had to be stamped and approved. Because you know what happened? Sierra Leone was being influenced by Liberia and Australia to steal the diamonds and then export it to Liberia and then export it to Europe at a cheap price. So this is a country which has suffered a lot of injustices, a lot of misrule, which I put at the foot of Chaka Stevens, who ruled undisputed for so many years, did not make sure the system was democratic, and he didn't develop the place. So now that they are trying to get on their feet, I believe that they should be given a chance and they should allow the democratic process to evolve. I wish both candidates well, but then I hope that the best candidates win.
So you wouldn't pick on one. JB, you have in 30 seconds. Would you pick on any one of the candidates? You've already expressed that you don't like.
I don't like Mother because of his past record.
Right.
And so a person with such a past record, it cannot be trusted. So I think they should go for the other candidate.
JB, thanks very much for your time once again this morning, and it's always a pleasure. So go get your breakfast, and we'll catch up later.
I'll get my breakfast. I'll also cook and cook.
All right. Okay. Right. So take care. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks very much. And that is it from me, Daniel Datson, this morning on The Discourse on London's Afropolitan radio station. Thanks very much. Efwa Adum is up next on the Metropolitan Mix. And after her, Sharon Rose is here with the Drive Time show. Well, as I've said, The Discourse returns next week with Esther Alade on Friday, the 23rd of March 2018, and she will be here to take you through. God bless you. Have a lovely day, but stay tuned to ABN Radio.
ABN Radio, London's Afropolitan radio station.
More news, more information. This is ABN News on the Hour.
From the Sky News Centre at 10, British scientist Professor Stephen Hawking has died at the age of 76. He was given just years to live after being diagnosed with motor neuron disease in his 20s. The University of Cambridge says he was an inspiration to millions. Eddie Redmayne won an Oscar for playing Professor Hawking in The Theory of Everything.